The 2025 NASCAR season starts off with the clash at Bowman Gray Stadium, and Chase Elliott pretty much dominated it, but it wasn't too bad. So the last few years, the clash has been at the LA Coliseum out in Los Angeles. This year, it was moved to Bowman Gray Stadium in North Carolina. It's been 54 years since they have raced at Bowman Gray Stadium, and I was actually looking forward to this race because of the layout of Bowman Gray was a bit different than the way the LA Coliseum was. The LA Coliseum is like really narrow and like it's almost like a Martinsville. And while this is similar to more of like a Bristol, but you're still shrinking them down to a quarter of a mile, while those are half mile. So it's still going to be really tight turns like Martinsville no matter what, but it's more rounded curves here than at the Coliseum. So I was looking more forward to that. I thought the race would be a little bit better, and it wasn't bad. We'll get into that more, but there was heats on Saturday night and qualifying and everything like that. So we're going to start off with that. I'm going to start off by saying the qualifying and the practice. We had 3 practice sessions, and really there were 2 practice sessions, 1 qualifying session. And what I hated about that was that what they did is the modifieds raced before the first, like before any cup cars were on the track. So that first group got really good lap times because those modified cars put down a ton of rubber on the track. So that first group got really good times. And what ended up happening is that we didn't know what any of the times actually were, because when they did that, they didn't reset the clicker. So we just had the first group was the fastest speeds, and we had no clue what the rest of them were because we weren't seeing their upgraded times. This was a problem all the way up until we finally got it changed for the qualifying things, but that was annoying because practice was pretty much useless to anybody watching on TV because we didn't know those times. And really, unless you knew the times, if you had like a in-race thing or something like that, you didn't know any of that. But in that, it was pretty, you kind of already knew which drivers were going to be the like top dogs. And then whenever we got into heats, the heats were entertaining. 2 of them at least. 2 of them were kind of like chaos, and then 2 of them were pretty much clean. The thing was though, and I noticed this in the heats, and I was optimistic that it would not be this way in the next 2, but it was very hard to pass the leader. It was very hard to pass anybody once they got spread out, especially that top like 5. Once they got single file, unless you had a really good car or there was a really bad car up front, you weren't going to be passing a whole lot. In fact, in all the heats, there was no passing for the lead. The 4 leaders that started on pole for all the heats won all of their heats. So, yeah. And I don't think this is a Bowman Gray Stadium problem, and I don't even think it was a LA Coliseum problem. I still think it's that short track problem. These cars, they've finally kind of figured them out a little bit for the like half mile with like Martinsville, but they still haven't quite got it down to work on like quarter mile, so it just doesn't really work yet. It's getting there. It's a lot better than it was, and I don't know if that's entirely on Bowman Gray was better track, or if that is the car is getting better, but it's getting there, and I hope that they aren't going to go a few more years and then we finally figure it out and they change the package again. Hopefully that's not the case. Wouldn't surprise me, but hopefully not. Now on to the last chance qualifier. Some notable names that were not in the race at this point. Ryan Blaney was the highest in points that was not going to be able to be in. So pretty much because of that final spot that you didn't have, whoever was highest in points last year that wasn't already in was going to be locked in on points. Ryan Blaney was pretty much locked in because Joey Logano had won his way in, or raced his way in, and then Blaney was second in points. So obviously Blaney was just going to do that. There's no reason for him to really try to wreck his car on a last chance qualifier and basically not have a car left whenever it comes to the finale. So then it was Larson, Ty Gibbs was still in there. Those 2 were the ones that basically, if Larson raced his way in, it would have been Ty Gibbs. Or if Larson and Blaney would have raced their way in, it would have been Ty Gibbs. If Blaney raced his way in, it would have been Larson. So those two were the next two highest in points. Quite a few of the big names were already locked in, but there was some notable things that happened in the last chance qualifier. Most notably, the Dillon brothers tried to prevent both of them from getting in. Ty Dillon actually started on pole for the last chance qualifier, and I could have told you very early on that that was not going to last, and it did not. But yeah, he did give it a good chance or a good try. It just didn't really work out. Austin Dillon was there. He had some speed, but just not really enough to contend, especially with how aggressive he was going. It was obvious somebody was going to end up like just shipping him out of the way because they were getting tired of them. But he was there. Ty Gibbs started pretty far up and he led a lot of the first half, but he just did not have speed at all. I don't know if that's him not being very good at this style of track or if it is that car was awful, but one of the two, it just didn't work. And he was good at the LA Coliseum last year, so I kind of hoped for a little bit more out of him, but no, he was just not there at all. He fell back pretty quickly, and because Blaney was off the track at this point, it was obvious he was not going to get in. Ty Gibbs does miss out on the main event, and he ended up spinning later on in the last chance qualifier too. So at the end, it came down to Eric Jones, Josh Berry, and Larson were the three kind of racing up front, and it was going to be two of them where they could all wreck each other out, and they tried to. But Eric Jones ended up getting the brunt of that, and then Josh Berry and Kyle Larson raced their way in. Now, I do want to give a shout out to Burt Myers. He was one of them that was kind of like the home track hero. He was in the 50 car. And then there was also Tim Brown. And both of them were, it's just a good story for them to be in the race at all. So congrats to them for even competing in a cup race. And they didn't do anything horrible. Like, they didn't make a fool out of themselves. In fact, Burt Myers was running fairly well. He was coming up through the field whenever he got crashed, and he spun himself off the front of Ricky Stenhouse. I looked at some replays. I don't think Ricky Stenhouse really meant to do that. I think Ricky Stenhouse was trying to get into a hole. I think Burt Myers thought he had more room, and it didn't work out. And so, yeah. But he was doing good, and then Tim Brown ended up finishing 10th in last chance qualifier, which doesn't sound that good, but considering he's in Rick Ware racing equipment, that's not bad. So yeah, Larson, Blaney, and Berry ended up advancing on to the main event. And another thing that I want to comment on is that when we were going through like the pre-race stuff, like race day, they spent time and they have the lights off in the background. They're doing the strobe lights and everything, and they're like, if you're wondering what's happening in the background, that's driver introductions. And then they're talking about the Super Bowl. I'm not here to listen to you talk about the Super Bowl. I don't care what Clint Boyer has to say about the Chiefs. Great for him. Let's talk about that next weekend. This weekend is NASCAR. Don't try to sell your fans away to another sport. Let us see the driver introductions. If there are new fans coming into the sport and they're like, hey, I'm going to watch this year for whatever reason, maybe they didn't watch before, and now 2025 is the first year they're going to watch every race. They don't know the drivers. Driver introductions for the start of the year is a great way to do that, and you just don't do it. It's so easy. You don't even have to do anything. Just put the camera on driver introductions. Let Rick Allen, which was apparently the track announcer, let him do all the announcing. You don't even have to do anything. Why they didn't do that, I don't know. But yeah, that was a nitpick of mine. Now the main event. The main event was not as chaotic as the last chance qualifier by far. The last chance qualifier, there was cautions all over the place for the most part until kind of the later half. But the main event was kind of caution not free. There was some, like Kyle Busch wrecked. Carson Hocevar would wreck later on. But for the most part, it was pretty much pretty clean. Now, in the first half, it was pretty much dominated by Chase up until about 7 to go. And Denny Hamlin was catching him pretty quickly, actually. And Denny Hamlin finally got around him, and then Tyler Reddick got around him. And I was thinking, wow, maybe there is some, good fall off to these tires, and it's going to be a good race for the next part. Not so much, but it was a decent first half, at least racing in the second, like the last 20 laps of that. I thought it was pretty good. But for the most part of that, it was good racing in the back. I think there was some good passing. Ryan Blaney came from dead last up to 10th, I think it was, in the first stage. So big improvement there. We'll talk about him more here in a minute. But big improvement there. He did the same thing out in LA last year. So big congrats to him on doing that. In the second half, there was a few more incidents. The first half was just, I think it was the incident with Kyle Busch, and then also the incident with William Byron. In the second half, there was more incidents. There was the one where Joey Logano bumps into Carson Hocevar, and then he bumps into Christopher Bell, and then going into the next turn, now that Carson Hocevar is ahead of the three, Joey Logano bumps then into Christopher Bell, and then bumps into Carson Hocevar, which just sends him over into the tire barrier. He didn't run awful for the rest of the night, so apparently that was fine, but that was kind of a whoopsie on Joey Logano's part there, or he was doing it on purpose. We don't know. It's Bowman crap. But after a few kind of rapid succession cautions there, one with Kyle Larson and Chase Briscoe, which was in the 19, and Chase Briscoe ended up finishing last, even though he did run pretty good in the heats and everything. He did end up finishing last. I think it was the steering issues what ended up getting him. But I feel like for the most part, everybody did pretty good. But then in the second half, there was basically nothing because Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin kind of versed at the restart, and then Chase Elliott got away. Blaney at this point was running, I think, third or fourth, and he ended up passing all the way up to second. But by the time he got to second, I think he had wore his stuff out, and Chase Elliott, not really doing much up in front, had tons left. I think he was still had some in the tank if he needed to, and he goes off into the sunset and wins the event, leading like 100 and I think 70 laps. So good on him for that. I can't blame him. I can't be critical on him because he was doing very well. Let's look at the top 10 here. In first place was Chase Elliott. As I mentioned, he did very well, led tons of laps. I found it funny that they were like, Chase Elliott has led the most laps in Clash history. Yes, because if we did 200 laps at the Clash in Daytona, we would have been there for days if it was like the 2020 Clash where they wrecked 15 million times and there would have been no one left. So, yeah. But there's been 4 years and no one's led that many laps. So good on him for that. Ryan Blaney was second. Like I said, came from the back, finished second. I liked his comment where he said, if we were able to not start one of these clashes in last, we might actually win one, maybe next year. But Denny Hamlin came away with third. He had some speed at points, but it seemed like, kind of like with Blaney, he fell off pretty quickly. I think him trying to run the outside for the first half of the second half, it just kind of killed his tires, and I think that was the end of it. In fourth was Joey Logano. I actually was kind of thinking he'd do a little bit better than he did. He was kind of irrelevant other than just kind of coming up the field very slowly. But he was there, and he did run fairly well besides shipping Christopher Bell and Carson Hocevar a few times. Bubba Wallace gets fifth and a top 5 finish. This was great to see. He had some speed. Short track seemed to be his mojo whenever he's really going. I'm hoping Bubba Wallace has a great year. He's got a new crew chief. I know that's not a big deal this weekend. I know it plays somewhat of a role, but it doesn't play a huge role. But he's got a new crew chief. Maybe he can get in a good rhythm this year. But you know, it's good start. Good start. It's motivation. Just to finish well in this race, I think it's good motivation for the rest of the year. Ross Chastain ended up finishing 6th. He was not really relevant until I realized with like 30 to go, oh, he is like coming through the field. And he did pretty well. I shouldn't have been shocked. He's, you know, Ross Chastain. He can kind of show up whenever he wants. But I was shocked. I didn't think he was running that well. And there he was. Austin Cindric comes away with 7th. I was kind of happy to see this because I think his best tracks are kind of like these flat, short tracks, and he was doing very well. He never really like moved from that like 6th to 12th range. Like he just kind of stayed there all race. And so I feel like if it was another restart, he could very easily have finished 12th. But he was in that fight. He didn't do bad, didn't do great either. Like he just kind of stayed in the average spot all race long. Tyler Reddick in 8th is kind of surprising because I thought there was more for him. Like I said, he moved up all the way to 2nd at that first half. And then after that, he just kind of like slowly faded away. I don't know why, because it wasn't like he used up all of his stuff because they all got new tires and everything. So he should have been at least a little bit relevant at some point, whether it be at the beginning or end of that second half. But he just wasn't. He just kind of faded the whole time and ended up finishing, further back in the top 10 and 8th. Now here's a surprise. Number 9, Shane Van Gisbergen. I shouldn't have been surprised because he did run well at short tracks in the Xfinity Series, but I didn't expect him to run well at Bowman Gray, but apparently he knows how to wheel it around these little bitty tiny tracks. And coming away with 9th, I was very impressed with that. And he was not like, just weaseled his way up there. He was actually running fairly well the entire race. Never was there a point where I thought, oh, he could win this thing. No, but it was good to see. I do think he's making big improvements already. And so I'm looking forward to how the rest of this year goes with him. Going from Bowman Gray to Daytona, he has raced Daytona before, so we'll see how well that goes in 2 weeks here. And finally, rounding off the top 10, Chris Buescher. He was started up further back, further in the front, and then kind of faded. He was kind of like Tyler Reddick. Like he was there, and then he just disappeared. And I don't know why. I don't know. I don't know what they did to not be able to be relevant in that second half, but they just weren't. They just, as soon as they got past, they were done. So basically this is my first race review that I've ever done, and I want to do something fun for this because, everybody else, they have like their grading scale, or they're going to give it like a letter grade or whatever like that. I don't really want to do that because then I feel like I'm copying people, and that seems like not very fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rank every race throughout the entire year based on just my opinion. I'm going to try to be completely unbiased on winners or, who didn't run well, if my favorites didn't run well, or if my least favorites, ran well. I'm not going to play that into factor in. I'm just going to try to be as unbiased as possible. And this one is the number 1 race of the year so far. It's not got a lot of competition, but it's there. And we'll continue to upgrade this race throughout, or this chart throughout the year, and I'll try to make it better looking because this is quite bad. But anyway, we'll do that as the year goes on, and we'll kind of compare it to like, oh, was Atlanta better than Watkins Glen? It's gonna be hard to compare, but we'll do it. So anyway, like I said, this is my first race review. I'm not expecting a big crowd of people in this first thing because I think I only have like 20 subscribers on this channel right now. But if you did enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more. We'll post them throughout the year. I won't be posting a video until the Gatorade Duels, or not Gatorade Duels, gosh, what is it, 2008? But I will be posting one for the duels, and then I'll post one again for the 500. If there's any like major news story that I feel like I need to make a video about, then I'll do it. But I'm not going to just bombard you with videos that I don't really think I'm the best one to tell them at. I want to get better at telling you about NASCAR stuff, and then whenever I feel like I'm there, and there's enough of you that want to listen to my opinion, then we'll start to do that. So until then, I will see you guys in a week and a half for the Gatorade duels. They should be the Gatorade duels, but they're not. The duels at Daytona, and then we'll kind of review those two, and then we'll review the 500 here in a few weeks. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you guys next time. Congratulations to Chase Elliott and all of his fans on the Clash win. But until next time, bye.